Hey, what is up, guys? The Strong Boys 19 here, and I'm here with Elliot, aka EQPTV, for a special episode for Classic Albums Revisited, where I will be reviewing some of my favourite albums of all time. And for this episode, we're going to be reviewing together the incredible and iconic album from the 2000s that's going to celebrate its 20th anniversary this year, and that is White Pony from Deftones. So, White Pony, what can we say about White Pony? I think it is still, for me, their strongest album in their entire discography, and the band had become even more of an exploring, diverse band, as with the later albums, where they take a lot of influences from genres later on in their career. And I think Deftones are one of those bands that are really unique and so interesting, from their production to the songwriting. So let's just talk about White Pony then, man.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's definitely my favourite Deftones album as well. Obviously, as they're one of my absolute favourite bands, have been since the first time I heard this album. And I don't think they've released a bad album yet. Even my least favourite album of theirs is still very highly rated in my opinion. But it's certainly, as you say, it's definitely their best album. And one of the most interesting things about this album, in my opinion, is the turmoil it was born out of. And I think that really makes it a stronger album overall. But obviously, when we go track by track, you'll hear more about that.
I discovered Deftones pretty much at close to the mid-teens, and I had discovered music videos around the time when Saturday Night Wrist came out. So I was seeing videos from Mine, Hole in the Earth, Back to School being the first one that I've ever seen from the band, to My Own Summer, etc. And I was quite fascinated by their sound, because at that time I was diving into other bands like Slipknot, to Trivium, Mastodon, and Bullet for My Valentine at the time, etc. But I was very interested in their sound, and the more I listened to their music, I really have a bigger connection with the band. So out of all of the albums that I would recommend for anyone that wants to get into the band, I would recommend this album. But as I mentioned earlier on, that they were really expansive on the later material to other genres like trip-hop, shoegaze, and more on the alternative side, I recommend Koi no Yokan, which, in my opinion, is one of the Deftones' best albums, along with the previous album, Around the Fur, which was one of their more heavier and aggressive-sounding albums. But I think with White Pony, it pretty much defines the sound of the band entirely.
I had a similar experience to you, but mine was slightly delayed, whereas you were getting into the band on the Saturday Night Wrist cycle. I was getting into them on the album after, which was obviously Diamond Eyes for the fans out there. I'm sure already know that. But I heard the singles of that, like the title track, Rocket Skates, You've Seen the Butcher, Beauty School, all of those songs. And to this day, I'd say that's possibly my second or third favourite Deftones album. It's a very well-renowned one. It's one of their heavier albums for sure. And around that time, that's really what I was looking for. But the first time I heard White Pony, which was the second album I got into, I was just in a record shop. I'd gotten into Deftones fairly recently, and everyone was telling me how good White Pony was, but I hadn't heard a second of music off this album until I purchased it. And often an album like this, you'd think it would take quite a while to grow on me. And I remember like the first couple songs, I was sort of shocked by how not beefy the production is. Like, obviously I got into post-hardcore and that sort of thing later, which explains exactly why they sounded like that. But to me, it was a bit of a shock. But by the end of the album, I knew I was a fan for life. And then I went into their other albums, listened to the earlier stuff, the more recent stuff. And they're one of the few bands where I own everything they've ever done, and I don't think there's a dud in their entire back catalogue. But yeah, White Pony, like to this day, I still think it's their finest achievement, despite everything else also being great.
Awesome. So let's go into our words and thoughts track by track on the entire album from start to finish, why we think White Pony is their best achievement. So the first song is Vaitashira. I might have pronounced that right or wrong. I apologise. The song pretty much is an opening simple guitar line in the intro, and then builds with the drum beats that crashes into the sound of the entire band. And I think the structure is effective as the band progresses. It goes just from the whole band and then switches to quieter moments with more effects. And as the track progresses later on, there's some more effects on Chino's vocals. And I find the rhythm was brilliant and memorable. So I think it is an excellent starting song.
Well, I have a very different experience of Fiat Chera. Again, I don't know if I pronounced it the correct way either, but
Yeah.
it's one of those albums where, I mean, this is just testament to how much I like it. I love this song, and it's not to give a spoiler now, but it's possibly my least favorite on the album, which it's not a shared view, but it's one I have. But after Diamond Eyes, hearing that and how beefy the guitars sound, you turn this on, and it sounds like Slint or Juno 44, Drive Like Yahoo, Quicksand, Helmet, bands like that, like with a lot more wiry than I was expecting. But I agree, great song, and I can only imagine what this must have sounded like to someone who was getting into Deftones at the time, especially after Around the Fur, which is really focused on the low end, as any Deftones fan will know, and this is a much more shrill, wiry guitar tone. It took a slight bit of getting used to, but I agree, the song is absolutely superb, and it really kicks off the album in a way unlike any of their albums before or since have done. It's a weird one because it sort of shows their hand, it shows how different they are on this album, but it doesn't really show precisely how they're different, which I think is a very interesting way to structure it.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good track to start the album, and then we go into track 2, which is Digital Bath, which I consider to be one of the top best Deftones tracks. I love the song from the opening reverb on the drums and the gentle shoegaze kind of environment of the clean guitars. The verses flow throughout from Abe's drumming, and I love his drumming on this one because I think he has some sort of his own flow of his drumming patterns, and I thought the chorus was as strong as it was packed with distortion, and it's quite experimental from the tone and the deep sound. So I think Digital Bath is one of my favourites on this record.
I think even beyond that, I think Digital Bath is possibly one of the crowning achievements of rock music of that era. Anyone I know who's ever been in the band has told me that the way they do the sound check is they test with the Digital Bath intro drum part, because the sound of it, I mean, we'll get to the production later when we talk about Terry Date and all that, but the opening drum part it's so sharp and rich at the same time. And, you know, to talk about, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that this album was sort of two warring factions coming together. You had Chino Marino, vocalist, who wanted to make a more dreamy album, as you said, shoegaze, dream pop, alternative electronica. That's a lot of his influence coming in here, a lot of 80s new wave. And then you had Steph Carpenter, the guitar player, who wanted to make something even heavier, like he wanted to make something that sounded like Sepultura. So the album is sort of a middle ground of those two people pulling in opposite directions, and this whole album is the middle ground, but Digital Bath is clearly more on the Chino side of things. Like, it's a lot more gentle for most of it, but that's not to say the chorus is slacking, because every time the chorus comes in, it is as powerful as anything else on here. I think Digital Bath is just, I mean, not to spoil anything too early, but I think it's probably the iconic song off this album, and possibly one of their highest achievements to date.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Every time I listen to it, it really just grows on me, and it's just a pretty powerful song.
No, I was just going to say, like, it's one of those where this is when the album really clicked with me, because Fiat Sarah it's only like 2.5, 3 minutes long. It's a bit of a blast. It's sort of over in no time. And then this, like, yeah, time to dwell on it and get used to it. And by the time it was done, you just thought this, at least for me, I thought this is one of the finest rock songs I've ever heard.
Incredible stuff. Just one of the strongest. And then we just go into the track Elite, track number 3. And I think that this was even more of an aggressive tone of sound than Digital Bath, because of the sound of Chino's vocals, as I think that they were pretty compressed from the distortion, and Chino's screams were intensely strong on here with very simple riffs, as it strangely reminds me of a System of a Down song. I really do think the guitars sound awesome on here, as they are, you know, quite a fat sound. It's got brilliant control on the beats, on the drums once again. And to me, I do love this one as much as Digital Bath.
Well, this is, as I was saying about like the to and fro. This is clearly a Steph Carpenter song. It's by far the heaviest song on the album. It's the most like outwardly aggressive, consistently aggressive. Some songs maybe get heavier, but they've got more dynamics. Whereas this is just 3 minutes and it's, you know, mercilessly heavy as far as the Deftones go.
Yeah.
But I'd say it's probably the only song on the album which could also fit on something like Adrenaline. Like it's got a very similar riff style stuff like Engine Number 9 and Root.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that sets it apart from Adrenaline, which obviously I still love, but the one thing that I think takes this a league above is just the songwriting quality. I think Chino's performance lyrically and vocally is pretty untouched in terms of his aggressive side. And so it's no surprise this is the song that won a Grammy. It's infectious, it's immediate. It doesn't, again, when it comes to that chorus, that's pretty spacey stuff going on there. Like they don't slack on that either. So I just think, again, we're going to be saying this for every single song, but it's another excellent achievement in the band's discography.
Indeed. The next track we're going to go into is RX Queen, and I think the drumming was rhythmic right from the start, and I think the sound of the music was packed with many effects on the guitars, as the track focuses on the less aggression from the previous track, but it still was involved with the multi-tracked vocals, I think, the way it was made. And I think it has a similar kind of environment from Digital Bath, but a bit darker in the atmosphere towards the end as well, with the sound effects and the sound of lower tuned guitar notes. But I really like this one.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this one as well. As you say, like the drum performance on this is just, it's so unpredictable and varied, but it keeps that groove. It's not a sporadic Mr. Bungle style thing where you don't know where it's going or how to follow it. But when you're listening to it, you're just like, this is so inventive and clever. But I really think the man of the match on this song is Chi Cheng. I think his sort of stuttering bass lines on this they're exceptional. And it's one of those things where, you know, I love Sergio Vega, the new bass player. I think he's filled the role excellently. I think he's a great live presence and everything. Yeah. But I think this is the sort of song that shows that Chi Cheng wasn't just, you know, a great bass player and a great fit in the band. He was a special character there. And the invention he shows in his bass lines is almost never shown better than it is on RX Queen.
Indeed. Very good track. Then the next one, Street Carp. I think this one was very strong on its engaging riffs, and the song was catchy while the song ascends with more of the heavy playing style and the memorable chorus, and while Chino switches again from his screams to the cleans on his vocals. And I think when I listen to this song, it does remind me on a similar way of early Deftones songs. It's something that reminds me of a track or two from the Adrenaline album, strangely.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. I think weirdly this is a strange song because while being very straightforward, like it's not a hard one to follow, it's less than 3 minutes, it's got a lot of repeating motifs. This is almost one of the best examples of the two band members pulling the hardest, because the guitar riffs, while they're not entirely heavy, they're very discordant, very mathy. But then you have Chino, whose vocal performance almost rivals Morrissey. It's got a lot of the wailing that Morrissey would do on, you know, some of the Smiths' best albums. That's a great combination. It's one of the things which you wouldn't think would work, but, you know, it's only proven in how influential they've been, particularly on this album. Yeah, the chorus is one of the best the Deftones have ever done, despite the lyrics being a bit odd. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of Street Carp. I wish they'd play it live more. It's one of those where they often go into deep cuts, but it's one of those which I think they could do to pull out every now and then.
Yeah, I would love to see them live sometime, whenever the whole world's in a better place. But yeah, the next song, Teenager, which I think it was the softest touch of material, a loop of some sort of acoustic guitar line, and it grows with the accompaniment of synthesizers, and the beat was a trip-hop style beat. It contains various glitchy noises while the singing continues. To listen to this track that is very mellow, and after all of the intensity of the aggression, I think Teenager was a very nice one.
This is another one of my favourite songs on the album, despite being one that's very on Deftones. In fact, the band it resembles the most to me is well, not a band per se, but the stuff that it reminds me of is the early 90s, late 80s post rock movement. I don't know if it's a
Yeah.
direct influence, but stuff like Talk Talk comes up a lot on here. Tortoise, especially the TNT album. Um, but another influence, which I'm not sure if the band recognise or have mentioned much, but Smashing Pumpkins, I think, is a real presence here. Like the vocal melody reminds me a lot of Billy Corgan, and that
Yeah.
dreamy guitar line. I think that's a real contender on Teenager.
Yeah, I didn't really think about that. I didn't think of any other vocalists that have that similar tone like Chino, but the more I think about it now, I bet I'll just play the album again, and when Teenager comes back on, I'll just think about that part.
Yes.
Yeah. Now we go to, in my opinion, my favorite track on the entire album, which is Knife Party. And this one was powerful on its exciting performances, while the musicianship was strong on this one. And I love the chorus when it was striking and full of hooks. To me, it was a beautiful touch on the swirling guitars and the background of the improvised female vocals after one of the choruses from the song's continuation. And I just admire this song so much, and I think it's one of my top 5 favorite Deftones songs.
It's actually I'm pleased to hear you say that because it's actually also my favorite song on the album.
Oh, nice!
I think it's the like perfect balance between like ferocity and beauty. Like China's melodies in the verses are so serene and dreamlike, but underneath you got that rumbling rhythm section. Just like, I mean, Abe Cunningham on here is just unbelievable, and the way he works with Chi Cheng and that sweet serene guitar line. While it's not the most famous song on the album and it's not the catchiest or anything like that, I think if someone said what is the iconic song of White Pony, I think this song sums it up the best, and I think it's an amazing like centerpiece to the album.
Yeah. To me, it has always been the highlight every time I listen to the album, especially onto the chorus part of "Go Get Your Knife" and hearing those complex drums. It is the main classic for me. But Digital Bath being another high favourite, but I think Knife Party just stole the show for me.
But oddly, it wasn't my favourite song not by them necessarily. I don't know what my favourite Deftones song is. That would be a whole other conversation. But I think it became my favourite song on White Pony when I saw them play it live. And obviously the iconic riff started, and I was like, excellent, they're playing stuff from my favourite album of theirs. And then, as you say, like when that chorus came in, I was just like, this song is much better than I ever gave it credit for. And now every time I go back to it, it's just, I'm reminded of how exquisite it is. And I think it's wildly underrated, this song. I wish more people had spoke about it.
I would definitely put this in as like a starter, a recommendation for anyone that wants to get into the band, besides some others. Next track, Korea, and to me, this has another descending amount of power from the heavier guitar riffs. The drumming is, for me, one of Abe's best on his tight patterns like Knife Party. I think this song is amazing on its continuing instrumentation while the vocals switch again, from the heaviness to the cleans. But then Chino just goes much more insane on this one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember this is one of the songs that I have the most vivid memory of hearing for the first time, bizarrely enough. I just think that riff, it's like Deftones playing Rage Against the Machine. It's got that sort of Bulls on Parade, rumbling, rolling feel to it, but it's a lot more dissonant than anything they ever did. And as you say, Chino on that song is just off the chain. And one person I think is worth mentioning here, especially who we haven't really mentioned so far, is Frank Delgado. This is obviously his first album with them. And just the way he fills the space on what is essentially quite a basically written song. He has this almost this musical layer to it, which lifts it to another place and creates a whole different feel to it. And I'm endlessly impressed by his work. And this is one of his less subtle appearances. He's quite obvious on this song, and I like it for that.
I think with Frank to come in as the full-time member of the band for more than 20 years, I think he adds in his own space and sounds to the band. And obviously with the aggression going on from the the rest of the band, I think with the synths and the turntables, they add in a bit of more style to it. You know, it's like with Craig from Slipknot, who added his own parts to their music, and I think Frank did a brilliant job.
Yeah, that's a great comparison because, I mean, equally, it's one of the things where people tend to dismiss Craig in Slipknot as sort of a, what's the word, a disposable member. But if he wasn't there, they just wouldn't be as good. The same as Frank. Like, the first two albums are superb, but they're just, the band are better with him there.
The next track we go to is Passenger, which has a layered wall of sounds from the ambient noise from the start, and it opens the song with more brief guitar notes and the wicked drums, while Chino becomes melodic, some parts on the soft music, and I really do like his vocals on this one too. Decide to build in some softness and then to increase the tension of their music, and I like the harmonics on the higher notes on the guitar's background before the chorus explodes and bursts with a dramatic bridge. I think the bridge section was brilliant.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Another great point here, which shows how adaptive the Deftones are, is once obviously Maynard James Keenan makes an appearance on this song. Once he comes in and he's just a melodic powerhouse, Chino sort of changes his style to be a bit more woozy and understated. Which, if it was just him, you might think that's a bit of an underwhelming vocal part. But the way it plays off with Maynard's is it shows that there's almost no ego in that band, and it's all about improving the song because both singers are totally playing to their strengths. They're both doing things the other couldn't do, and the song is just so much better for that. And as you say, like the way the drums and guitars like flick off each other, and there's those like breathing things in the spaces between it. It's just this is again another incredible achievement in the Deftones discography. I don't necessarily return to this song that much, probably because I played it to death when I first heard it. But I do think, this is how you do a guest vocal. It doesn't feel, shoehorned in, I should say, or like it's forced. It's just so effortless.
So the next track, one of the band's most beloved and I'd say signature tracks, which is Change in the House of Flies. So this one is a nostalgic favourite, and it still remains as a main classic on the repertoire of the band, and I love how the mood was on this one. It's dark from the verses and the perfect chorus that is still strong. It sounds immense. I do still adore this song. It sounds as fresh, and its moments on just its crushing environment on the layered guitars, while the vocals sound chilling. So to me, it's always a very well remembered and wicked song. Another highlight for me.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's got a strange quality to it. And this is not necessarily just about the song, but this is sort of outside of it. One of the kindest things you could say about this song is that when you think about it's probably their biggest hit. I think it's got their most plays on Spotify. If you look at like other huge songs of the new metal era, you think like Chop Suey, Duality, Blind, all of those. And I think Change in the House of Flies probably has the best claim to never being overplayed. Every time you see them, like if I was to go see Slipknot and they didn't play Duality, I wouldn't be that upset. Likewise with Korn playing Blind. It's just, it's the way it is. If I went to go see Deftones and they didn't play Change in the House of Flies, I feel a bit shortchanged, and it's just on the pure quality of songwriting. It's so graceful and delicate, and then when the chorus comes in, it just washes over you. It just sounds so mighty. It's that real understanding of dynamics that I think they had pretty much better than any other band of their era, and possibly any other band full stop. I just think they're just exceptional at that.
I think with a song like this one, I think it just may sound obvious, but many other songs do this same thing. But I think it's a song where it lets you actually listen to it, and it does a lot of the talking. While there's not quite a big bundle of lyrics on this song, there is some form of character to that song.
Yeah, and like when you think about like other big songs, it hasn't got like a huge Goliath riff. It's not got an obvious hook of any kind. It's just an exceptionally well-written song, and you can hear like on the acoustic version and stuff, the song doesn't lose any of its power, and that's that's a really remarkable thing that I think they should be acclaimed for.
Change is just a gem of a song. Now we just go into Pink Maggot, the closing track on this album. As I would think about it, it is possibly the slowest track because it has nothing else, going on immediately other than just the droning guitar chords and some more of the chilling singing style from Chino, and then it continues that whole pace a lot until the next few minutes comes in when they just change everything, where it was building a repetitive but catchy hook until the end of the song. So even though that it doesn't have so much going on like the previous tracks, I think that this one is great because of its simplicity, and then the band would later on use this song to Back to School.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, Pink Maggot's a strange one because it sort of feels like an extra treat where it's like almost no one talks about this song. In fact, a lot of people don't even seem to know it exists. They almost never play it live. But to be honest, I think maybe it's a matter of association or whatever, but I remember when I first heard this album, listening to it, and when this song came on and when it kicks in and he goes into that slow droning chorus, I immediately was like, this is one of the finest albums I've ever heard. It feels like the end of a movie or something. It's just so encapsulating of everything you've experienced so far. And I don't really understand why people don't talk about it or don't think so much of it. Especially when you listen to the dynamics of a song like that. You think about bands like Cult of Luna and ISIS and like Deftones for, I don't know if they're a nu metal band, but alternative rock, nu metal, whatever you choose to call them, for a band to be able to be that dramatic, despite it not really being their forte, as it were, I think that's a real testament to precisely how skilled they are. And this is one of the songs I come back to the most. I just think it'd probably be in my top 5 Deftones songs of all time. I think it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, I think Pink Maggot is a closing track that, again, like the other songs, it just has a sound of its own. And especially, like many songs from other bands that are experimental, like My Bloody Valentine, for example, because they have a lot of songs that have their own quality and tone. But Pink Maggot, to me, is a brilliant closer that just finishes everything from the beginning to the end of what the entire album presents entirely.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it's the perfect way an album should close, in my opinion. It's smooth. It goes back on everything you've already experienced while also offering something new. I think it should be more well regarded than it is.
Yeah, it's very overlooked for some people, but I don't think there is any weaknesses on this album, in my opinion, though I would say that I think my top 5 favourite songs on here would be Digital Bath, Elite, to Knife Party, Change, and I would definitely put in RX Queen and Pink Maggot. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be absolute agony to do a top 5. For the one off the top of my head, I'd say probably Digital Bath, Knife Party, Elite, Change, and Pink Maggot, I guess. But again, that could change every day. It's that sort of album where, even like the worst 5 songs on it are pretty much as good as the best 5. It's just so incredibly consistent.
So, with that being said, guys, we have discussed why we love this album very much. So, I think one of the best things about the album, besides the band, it has to be Terry Date with his production value.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think to this day he's had the longest tenure with the Deftones, did the first 4 albums. He's often said they're one of those bands which you wish he could have done all the albums by. Bob Ezrin, of course, did Saturday Night Wrist, which I love, but a lot of people aren't so keen on. Obviously more famous for doing things like The Wall, the Kiss albums, Alice Cooper, that sort of thing. Yeah. And then I don't know how you say his name, Nick Raskulinets, something like that. He did,
whatever it is.
he did Diamond Eyes and Koi no Yokan, and he did an excellent job on those as well. And then you had Matt Hyde on Gore, which I didn't think was a great production job. But yeah, his production job here is just absolutely superb. He perfectly balances the two warring factions on this band. Like it hasn't really lost any of the heaviness, but it's got a lot more space to grow. It's got all the drama which Chino wanted to put in there as well. And as I said earlier, listen to a song like Digital Bath, and it's just an absolute marvel of constructing a song and mixing it and everything.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely great and marvelous because I loved the way the drums sound. They just have some attack to it, especially on the way Abe delivers his own technique. And with the guitars, they are so huge. The sound of the mixing was excellent as well. So I would definitely seat this one as the best produced Deftones album. But I really like the production from Koi no Yokan because there are some beautiful sonics to that album. And with Around the Fur, that one is very good. But I think the sound for White Pony is really the best sound of the entire band.
I fully agree with that. I really like Saturday Night Wrist for capturing that dreamy edge, and that's what you get with Bob Ezrin. He's able to make things sound massive. The guy, I'm not going to say his name again, the guy who did Diamond Eyes, I think for that album it was perfect, like that really beefy, low-end, rumbling sound. But Terry Day on this album, he also shows just how flexible, and as we were saying earlier, adaptable he is. Or adaptive, I'm not sure what the word is. Because you look at his discography and he's done like Death Angel, Pantera, Limp Bizkit, more recently stuff like Bring Me the Horizon, and he just perfectly produces any album that I can see him getting his hands on, even if it's not for me. I just think, especially in this case, is just exquisite. Yeah, I can't say enough good things. And he's doing the new album, which is, good news.
Yeah, I am eagerly anticipated to hear what this band is going to do next. And come to think of it, I would also like to say Saturday Night Wrist has great production as well. But I think, I know we're going into production much more now, but I think with the Deftones music in production, a lot of them just have their own aspect to what these albums were made, from the way they were mixed and produced, not just by the band. But I think Gore, when I had listened to it, that is easily the weakest sound of production, that I would tolerate it less controversially than Adrenaline, because a lot of people didn't care for the production on Adrenaline, but I think Gore it's just too compressed, and I don't really like the sound. It drowns out the enjoyment that I was trying to get on that album.
I feel like the thing with, I agree that Gore and Adrenaline have the worst Deftones productions. Adrenaline has a charm to it because it's quite scrappy. It's almost amateurish, even though it is Terry Day. It's really fuzzy, rough around the edges, and I like it for that. Even if it's not the most professional job they've ever had. Gore, on the other hand, I didn't mind it so much when they're doing the more electronic thing, when it's not meant to sound that organic. But when they do the heavier stuff like Acid Hologram and Doomed User and that, the production just doesn't lend itself. It doesn't lend to it very well. It's just it sucks out all the weight. Didn't feel like there was nearly enough bite to those moments. I think if Terry Day or Nick had done it, then it would have been a much stronger album. I really like it anyway, but I think it would be more acclaimed generally if it had a more agreeable production job.
Terry Day, with his production on this album, absolutely stellar. So I would definitely rank this still as one of my favourite albums of all time, and if I would put it in a list of the top 10 of the 2000s, this one is definitely got to be in there because it has everything that I had loved to hear from Deftones. I mean, obviously my favourite album of the 2000s being Mastodon's Crack the Sky, but I think this one I would definitely put it in there.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to my mate earlier about this album, and we both said it's one of the few albums where it scratches every itch you want from rock and metal. Whereas, you know, if you listen to a death metal album, it scratches a very specific itch, or same if you go for a grindcore, you know, or a prog metal album, they're very specific to moods. Whereas this is one of those albums where you listen to it start to finish, and if you want something really menacing and biting, you have Career Elite. You want something gorgeous, you have Teenager and Changing the House of Flies. It's one of those very rare special albums where everything comes together, and you're really, if you're a fan of this style of music, I can't imagine you leaving wanting anything more. I just think it's a total success.
Yeah, and I think we would like to leave it at that as a wrap. So this is possibly the longest review that I will ever post on the channel, as we went on about the album for more than 30 minutes. But thank you very much for participating in this review, mate.
My pleasure, man. I'd love to do it again sometime.
Yes, so definitely check this one out, guys. And since this album is in my segment of Classic Albums Revisited, it's really no surprise that this album is still, to me, a 10 out of 10 record.
Yeah, fully agree.
So that's our review, guys, for White Pony by Deftones. Please let me know what you think of the album in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.